The Buick Electra was Buick's top-of-the-line nameplate from its introduction in 1959 all the way through the 1990 model year. And then in 1991, Buick put its Park Avenue nameplate as its range topper after the Park Avenue had been a trim on the Electra for a number of years prior to that. In fact, beginning in the 1975 model year, Buick had introduced an Electra Park Avenue trim that had a extremely sumptuous interior in it. And you can see here on this 75 Electra Park Avenue that you got these super cushy, loose cushion, velour, pillowed, I don't know how else to describe them, seats, and a large center console to complement your oversized Buick. But for 1977, Buick downsized its lineup of full-size cars, although the Electra and the Electra with Park Avenue trim was still an element of the Buick lineup. And I have to say that I think while the center console was lost in the 1977 version, take a look here and see the seats on the interior of this 1977 Electra Park Avenue. I think that they are just over the top, garish, crazy funky, but this was the 1970s after all. So what could you expect? Now, you have these seats, which are part of the interior for the 1977 Electra, and I love them, and I have to say, having sat in them, they're super comfortable. But the car itself had a lot more in terms of overall drivability and roadability and improvements versus the 1976 version that you could take advantage of while sitting in these comfortable seats. More specifically, not only was the 1977 model much more lean, mean, and trim versus the 1976 model, it also was more fuel efficient as the Buick 455 was eliminated after the 1976 model year, and the engine offerings in the Electra and Electra Park Avenue for 1977 were the Olds 403 cubic inch V8 as the top engine and the Buick 350 cubic inch V8 as the standard engine. This was around the time when GM started painting all of its engines its corporate blue color so that customers couldn't discern what was under hood nearly as much as they were previously able to, given that there was previously an Oldsmobile scandal where Chevrolet engines were finding their way into Oldsmobiles. GM was sued for that. And as a consequence, in the brochures for 1977 and beyond, GM started publicizing what divisions were making the engines for these vehicles, and also, as I mentioned, painting the engines corporate blue so that it was harder for the average buyer to discern what engine was under hood. Nonetheless, in 1977, you still got some reasonably powerful engines given the downsizing of the cars. These cars now weigh less than 4,000 pounds, as opposed to being 4,600 pounds. And the Olds 403 was reasonably peppy, made 180 horsepower. And by the time the Buick 455 and other 455s were going out for GM in 1976, they were only making 200-ish horsepower, in some cases less than 200 horsepower. So it really wasn't all that bad from a horsepower to weight ratio perspective to have the Olds 403 as the top dog engine under hood. Beyond that, though, this Electra Park Avenue that was produced from 1977 to 1980 had this awesome interior in terms of seats. Unfortunately, for 1981, Buick would go away from the super vulgar-looking velour of the 77 to 80 generation to a more tasteful kind of tufted pillow design on the 1981 models that would carry on through the 1984 model year when the Electra nameplate was transferred to the front-wheel drive vehicle for 1985. And by the way, that front-wheel drive vehicle in 1985 would keep those puffy seats, and they would even be kept even beyond that on the new model in 1991. So Buick customers must have loved their poofy seats, although the fabric did kind of change a little bit. It wasn't this so-called crushed velour anymore. It was more of a standard velour once Buick changed it in 1981. Now, as I mentioned, the full-size General Motors vehicles were downsized for 1977, and some of the interior trim bits were shared across various vehicles, like the armrests, as an example, were shared on the Buicks and the Oldsmobiles. And, well, there also were some other components, though, that were unique to Buick, the seats being one element. And the dash design was slightly different for Buick, as well as the top of the door trim panels. And Buick was the only car of the full-size General Motors vehicles for 1977 that had this faux wood grain all over the top of the door panels and all over the dash. So no real trees gave up their life in constructing these interiors, but plenty of fake trees did. And Buick just went over the top with fake wood, and I have to say it was rather unconvincing fake wood at that. But hey, this was luxury back in the 70s. There was another cool detail, and that was that when you got the Electra Park Avenue, that a little Park Avenue script on the dash near the glove box area would actually illuminate at night, just to remind you that you had paid extra money for the Park Avenue trim edition. I thought that was kind of a cool detail. Remember, this was a time frame when interior lighting, aside from just lights in the doors or overhead lights, really wasn't in vogue, not like it is today. I mean, now you have lots of ambient light in interiors. So I thought that was a nice touch on the Buick designer's part that they included that. You'll also notice that in the early years here, as shown by this 1977 Electra Park Avenue interior, that Buick stole the Cadillac three-spoke wheel that was introduced in the mid-1970s. And, well, I think for the 1974 model year, actually, and made it their own and put the little Buick logo in the middle. And then later on, Buick would steal the two-spoke Cadillac steering wheel design and use it in the Electra again. So somehow somebody just kind of gave Buick the hand-me-down components that Cadillac used to have from a few years prior. And I suppose that makes sense because Buick was a luxury car and a little bit cheaper than Cadillac. But I find it funny that Buick even robbed some of the steering wheels from Cadillac during this time frame. And I have to say, overall, the interiors in these vehicles were quite comfortable, and the cars actually had more room on the inside in many dimensions than the vehicles that they replaced. Part of that was just the overall styling of these 1977 vehicles, with much less tumble home or curvature of the body side from the center of the body up into the roof panel. And that allowed more interior space and headroom as well as shoulder room. If you sit in one of the 71 to 76 Electras, you'll find that the front seat doesn't come close even to touching the B-pillars on the inside because of that tumble home, whereas it's much closer to the B-pillars on the 77 plus generation. And these cars were comfortable. They were a foot shorter, roughly. They rode atop a 119-inch wheelbase versus a 127-inch wheelbase for the previous generation Electras. And they were more nimble. They were quiet. They were in many ways better built. They were reliable. This generation of GM full-sizers really was a series of great cars. They did have some teething problems, more, I would say, on the Chevrolet side of the lineup, where some of the V8s got turbohydromatic 200 transmissions behind them. That was just a terrible idea. That transmission was really first employed on the Chevette and somehow made its way, because of weight savings and fuel economy, into the full-size cars. But when you got the Buick and you had the Buick 350 or the Olds 403, you had the good turbohydromatic transmissions, like the turbohydromatic 400 backing the engine, and you didn't really have those challenges. So overall, great vehicles, and I love the Buick Electra. I have to say the styling as well during this years, particularly the 77 model, where the front end is super clean. I love kind of the 45-degree slope on the fascia area. And then out back, you have this kind of vertical but not vertical theme. You have the full-width tail lights on the back that really emphasize the horizontal nature of the car, make a car that's definitely narrower and taller than its predecessor look a bit wider. But you do have this vertical fin theme that Buick had for a number of years, really starting back in 1963, where they were kind of copying Cadillac. And this was during that time frame where the Buick Electra and the Olds 98 were picking up some of the Cadillac flair in these vertical styled themes out in the rear. And this was still continuing during this time frame. And it really would continue. The Electra had some hint of fin, I'll say, all the way through to the 1984 model year. And then when the new model was designed for 1985 and released, that 1985 Electra just did away with the whole vertical theme. by that point and went to the full wall-to-wall taillight that was a Buick character trait for a number of years to come. In any case, I wanted to at least share with you what I think is probably the most over-the-top interior that General Motors has done. Yes, the 75 and 76 Electra interior is similar, but I think the 77 to 80 version was even a bit more overstuffed when it came to the cushions. And it just, I don't know, I think maybe it's the smaller interior too. It just looks more vulgar to my eyes. But what do you think? Drop a comment in the comments section. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, take care.